What is up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of FitBizU. I'm your host, Jill Coleman, and I want to remind you that we are enrolling now for our 100% free experience. It's an 8-day full-on business education or a business intensive called Post to Profits. We're getting started next week. If you have not joined us, please do. We have an amazing group of people already getting into the Facebook group, introducing themselves, all that good stuff. So check the link in the show notes to join us. We get started February 5th, and I'm so excited for this. So this is specifically for those in the first few years of building their online business, especially if you are looking to fill your one-on-one coaching roster. So maybe you're brand new to coaching. Maybe you're even just an aspiring coach. Maybe you've never coached online before and you want to kind of get the lay of the land. This is definitely not an advanced training. It is not like, I promise you, if you are intimidated, you will be able to follow everything. I promise. We do trainings like this every once in a while. And this is one of my favorites because I get to work with folks who are just maybe thinking about starting their online business or are in the beginning stages and really want to learn how to do it right. So this is if you want to kind of understand the lay of the land, the business that we are in. And that's actually going to go into today's topic. So I've been thinking about this for a while and I wanted to do an episode on it. I am calling it the Online Coaching Triad. The Online Coaching Triad. As you guys know, if you listen to the show, I talk a lot about skills. And I've told the story of starting to snowboard as an adult in 2019 and the frustration that goes into learning a new skill that is tough. Whether it is, and I have friends that are learning, actually right now, my husband is in like Spanish lessons. He's trying to learn how to speak Spanish because where he works as a paramedic, a lot of Spanish speaking communities. And it's frustrating. Anytime we want to learn a new skill, it can be frustrating. And the same is true for business. If you think about marketing, sales, messaging, copywriting, lead generation, product development, all of these things that we have to learn how to do to have a viable, sustainable online coaching business, these things are skills. And meaning that in order to get better at them, you need reps. You need to get experience doing these things. And so for me, snowboarding, as you guys know, I went like 20 something times in my first season, which is like a lot of times to go snowboarding in a single season. And I went so much because I remember just thinking to myself, okay, people are obviously good at this. And I was looking around, I was seeing people and I'm like, these people don't seem like that much smarter than me, right? They don't seem like that much more athletic than me, whatever I was making it mean. I was like, okay, so it just must be a function of doing it more. So I just forced myself, this like kind of like exposure therapy. I just forced myself to like say yes, even though I wasn't having fun, by the way. And I remember Keith would be like, hey, do you want to go up to Mammoth, which is our like closest big mountain? And I was like, to just go down the mountain and fall on my ass like a dozen times does not sound very fun. But I kept saying yes and forcing myself to do it. And this is just like exposure therapy and psychology research is like the more we kind of are around it, the more we see, like understand all the moving parts of it, the more we are exposed to it, the more familiar it becomes and the easier something comes. So like, for example, exposure therapy, they do it a lot in studies. People who have different phobias, maybe you're scared of spiders and they take someone into a room and they put like a spider like in a cage, but it'll be like on the other side of the room. So you'll spend time just in the room, just like with the spider, but it's like in a cage, can't get out, and it's on the other side of the room. And then they'll like, next time you come in, you maybe go a little bit closer to the cage, but still in the cage, which is like a little bit closer. And they do this kind of systematically to show you that it is safe to be exposed to some of these things and that it does get easier. So this is like any skill, right? You go to, I don't know, if you're trying to learn Italian and you go to Italy, like you're going to mess up. You're going to try to speak it, but I'm sure you're going to mess up. You're learning a new musical instrument, you're going to mess up. Business, coaching, everything that we do online is no different. I don't know that you can get better at online business and the skills involved in it without doing it more, without having repetition, which of course this is a hard part of growth. And by the way, you guys, I don't know that that ever ends. You know, depending on what level of business you're at, there's always a next level. So for me, obviously in the last few years, you guys know it's been about like team and leadership and management and stuff like that. It's like, that's a whole different skill set from someone who had been a solopreneur for 10 years. So there's always a next level if you want to go to that level. And so I've been thinking about this and breaking down sort of how does one become successful online? And I'm calling it the Online Coaching Triad. These are 3 big skills. Now within these, there's smaller skills, but these are the 3 big skills that over time, not right away, by the way, over time, you have to get proficient in order to have a successful business. Now, the first is you have to know stuff that can help somebody, right? So this is being a subject matter expert. You need to have some kind of solutions for things that people are struggling with. And this is where it comes down to talking about what's my niche, who's my ideal client, and if I know who my ideal client is, identifying what are their biggest struggles, frustrations, challenges, even just unwanted experiences that they're having, and then asking yourself, okay, how can I solve that person's problem? So for example, someone comes to you and says, I want to lose weight, I want to get stronger, I want to build muscle, I want to get my blood labs better, I want to be more consistent in my eating, I want to start in the gym lifting weights, right? There's problems, quote problems, I'm calling these problems. These are more like frustrations or desires. I want to be able to X, Y, and Z. These are the things I want to get better at. And as a coach, day one, you would not have a job if you did not have the capability to help someone with something. So, subject matter expert. Now, when I say that, I always fear that the person listening to it is going to be like, I knew I needed a PhD in biochemistry. I knew I wasn't good enough to start online. That's not what I'm saying, because I think that whenever we talk about expertise, for many of us, we get a hit of imposter syndrome. We start thinking to ourselves, like, am I really good at this? Do I even know anything? Do I know enough? There's people online who know more than me. There's people online who have been doing this longer. And we start making all of these excuses for why we're not good enough. So I don't want you to hear that. I want you to think about it like this. It's very simply do I have a tool, a tip, a strategy that can help somebody and I'm one step ahead of where they are? Now, I've said this before, but a sixth grader can teach a fifth grader something. And you do not need to be 10, 20, 50 steps ahead of the person that you are helping. You just need to be 1 or 2 steps of the way there. Now, of course, over time, your expertise with more clinical experience will deepen, but you do not need to have PhD level expertise to literally take a couple $100s from a client on the internet and help them solve a problem. So number one is asking, like, do I have something that can help somebody? Now, a very simple example of this is, cool, you have a certification. You go through some kind of certification. You now know how to help someone perform exercises. You know how to cue someone's form. You know how to, advise on macro counting, right? You go through some kind of certification, some kind of credential to acquire knowledge. Another way of doing this is when you have your own transformation. And again, this doesn't make you necessarily a researcher expert, right? You have your own story of transformation. Doesn't mean that you read research and you know the ins and outs of the science, but you know what has worked for you. And as long as you're honest about that, hey, let me show you something that's worked for me. I actually love this kind of content. We're seeing it more and more now, which is like, here are the 5 things I did to X, Y, and Z. I love this because it's personal. It makes it more about human to human connection. And it's true. If something has worked for you, it cannot be proven wrong, right? It can't be proven wrong. Now, we can argue about if it can be applicable to everybody, right? Maybe not. But when I say, hey, JillFit has done this, this, and this, here's what we did, then I'm just saying, hey, this may or may not work for you. Now, are there other ways to be successful? Sure. You guys know I'm big on that. There's a bunch of different ways. There's tons of different business models, tons of different sales systems, tons of different types of funnels. But it is always true that what worked for you worked for you. Your story can never be wrong. And you are an expert in that subject matter for you. So as long as you say, hey, let me show you what's worked for me. Let me show you how I make this delicious dinner in 10 minutes. Let me show you how I make sure I get 100 grams of protein a day. Let me show you how I grew my glutes by a couple inches in the last 9 months. Let me show you how I trained to run this half marathon in record time. Whatever it is, that does make you an expert. So first of all, we won't have a business if we don't have solutions. And in order to have solutions, you have to know something about something. So this can be, again, credentialed. It can be a certification, could be through some kind of schooling. It could also be through your own personal experience. It can also just be through tons of clinical experience. You know, I was a personal trainer. I had my certification with ACSM, and I was a personal trainer for 13 years. And I was working up to 12 hours a day in the gym, up to 70 hours plus a week in the gym. Whether or not I kept my certification relevant, right? Whether or not I kept my certification relevant, I knew what to do with a client, right? Yes, I want to keep my cert relevant to have like the CECs, to make sure I had my credential to be able to work in gyms. But even if I didn't have that, didn't keep up my renewal, I knew how to get a client a result because simply I'd had so much experience with other people. So now it wasn't just here's what worked for me. It's like, actually, here's what worked for literally hundreds of other people as well. And I've synthesized everything, all of these client contacts to give you my best practices. Now, over time, you can't skip steps, right? So at some point, you have to go and get clinical reps to add on to your expertise. So now it's not just what worked for me, but now I'm starting to take on clients. And what worked for me may work for them, or maybe it won't. And you know what? I'm going to find that out. I'm going to work with the client together as a team to figure out what's going to work for them. So the first part of the triad is you need to have solutions. You need to be a subject matter expert. Can you help someone solve their problem or unwanted experience? Now, it can also be my expertise is this one specific thing. So for example, maybe your specialty is weight loss. And so if a client comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to participate in a powerlifting competition," you may be like, "I'm probably not the best person for you," right? So it's also knowing your expertise. And, when I was first getting started as a business coach, I could not have helped somebody who was at a 7-figure level. Number one, had never been there myself. And number two, I had never helped anyone do that. So I didn't know. And over time, of course, with more reps. So I would have categorized myself, 10 years ago as a beginner to online business coach, right? I was best at like getting someone to start their business. Now I still do that, obviously, with FBA. But now I have the skill set, I have the experience, I have the client contacts to be able to say, you know what, even if you're a more advanced business owner, even if you're at multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, I can help you scale because I understand it and I've done it. And so over time, right, your subject matter expertise will grow with your own experience. So that's the first part. You have to have that. I think everyone here has that. The second part of the triad is coaching skills. Coaching skills. This is different, right, than business. You can be a coach, right? Well, actually, let's take it back. Let's stick with the subject matter expert. If you are just a subject matter expert, right? Maybe you read research, maybe you read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts, you have a lot of knowledge, but you've never coached anybody, or you're not going to coach anybody, and you don't have a business. You could be a teacher, right? That would be something you could do. You could write blogs on theory. You could do YouTube videos. You could podcast, right? You could be a broadcaster, what we call a broadcaster, someone who's like, here's a bunch of information. You're not working with clients, and you're also not trying to market your business. You're just posting it on the internet, right? Or you could be a teacher in person, of course. Now let's layer on the second part of the triad, which is coaching skills. Now, there's a difference when it comes to coaching skills. Number one, you can go and learn theory, right? So this is where you could take a certification. You could take a certification on how to be a coach, and they'll be like, "Hey, here's how you do motivational interviewing, and here's how you help your client, be honest with you." And like they can give you all of the theory, and that's great. And there's plenty of those kind of courses and credentials out there. What I feel like is, in addition to that, way more impactful, of course, is clinical experience. You have got to take on a client. I talked to a gal in my DMs last week, and she said, "Hey, Jill, I think I'm in for FBA, but I'm a little bit worried because I have a business. So I kind of understand business." She goes, "I have an e-commerce business, but I'm just starting to become a coach in the health and fitness space. And I'm nervous because I haven't coached a client before." And I will tell you guys, probably about 50% of people who join FBA have never coached a client before, right? They're brand new to coaching. They're learning business. They have an expertise and they want to learn how to coach. And I don't know how you learn how to be a good coach without coaching. Like, I wish I could just be like, "You have the theory, you're anointed, go and like, you're the best coach ever." It's like, no, you have to get in the ring. You have to get into the trenches and coach people. And so there is a difference between theory and clinical experience. How do you get better at coaching? By taking on coaching clients. So I said that to the gal in my DMs. I said, "Well, it sounds like you have to take on your first client. You just have to take on your first client, and you got to trust yourself." And I think sometimes there's this misconception that when you take on a client, that number one, they know how it's supposed to go. You're like, "I'm going to get found out. It's my first client. They're going to know that I don't know what I'm doing." And it's like, no, they don't. And also, when you take on a client, so the second piece of that is when you take on a client, it doesn't go as fast as you think it does. So what I mean by that is, oftentimes we think if I take on a client, I have to know how to do everything right away. Because what if something happens? What if something comes up that I don't know how to handle? That's why I say it's a misconception, because that doesn't happen. Normally what happens is you start taking on a coaching client and you start with what you believe is the best place to start with. Now, if you've been a client, maybe you start with what the coach did with you. Here's an intake form. Let's do an initial consult. I'm going to set your macros for you. I'm going to start with some simple nutrition rules. I'm going to help you understand portion sizes, whatever it is, right? I'm going to give you a beginner to lifting program. You start wherever you believe someone should begin. And then over time, things come up. The client, maybe isn't getting the result, or the client is having a hard time with compliance, or the client is, not responding to you, or something you're sharing with the client doesn't seem to be working for them, right? Oftentimes we don't know what to do next with a client until there's some troubleshooting opportunities. And don't be scared of those. It's not like that's all going to happen in the first week. It may be like a couple weeks in or a month or two in, and someone's like, oh, I'm starting to like plateau or whatever. What's next? And then you got to be like, what is next? And you have to trust yourself to figure it out. And when I say this, you may be hearing, well, Jill, does this mean you're just making your coaching client like a guinea pig? It's like, no, you're still giving them your best practice. It's not like you're like, let me hold on one second. Let me consult my biochemistry book. It's like, no, you know this person. Talk to them like a human, communicate with them, ask them questions, like just be a good listener. And think to yourself, okay, if this was me, what would I do here? Right? Okay, I'm listening to this person. What is my best next guess at what they need? And let's try it. And nothing is irreversible. If you try something and it doesn't seem to work, you go, cool, that we ran up on a dead end. Let's try this instead. And so this is part of getting better as a coach. I think about my earliest personal training clients, like God bless them, but like I make some of them like puke. I'm not proud of that. I'm certainly not proud of it. But over time, and I hate that had to be like kind of a casualty of that. They'd leave just being like, they'd be so sore for days because I just didn't know, right? I'm like, I'm going to train them how I would train myself, or, I want to make sure they get a great workout so they feel like it's worth it. And then all of a sudden they like can't walk for like a week. I don't want to do that, right? But I had to in order to learn. And by the way, I did to myself too, right? Doing my first fitness competition, I gained back 15 of 20 pounds in 2 weeks after my show. I didn't know. I did it to myself too. And so as much as it does suck, but here's the deal is like, you will learn very fast. You will learn extremely fast. And if you have a trusting relationship with that client, they will be okay with your best next guess. Okay, cool. Let's try this instead. Okay, let's go over here. Okay, that didn't work. Everything is data. We're getting in real time feedback. And by the way, even when you have a lot of experience with coaching, you're still going to run up on things that don't work for people. So it's just your ability to iterate, your ability to pivot, your ability to find workarounds. And that's just a skill. So I don't know how you get better at the coaching skill without having coaching clients. You can, again, learn theory, but you have to just get your first client and you got to go, you know what? I just trust myself to just figure this out. And then I'm get my second client, and then you get better at it. Like my third client, I get better at it. So I know that can be a big fear, especially for those getting started, this odd fear of like, what if I do get a client? I don't know how to get them a result. You do though. You're scared of things that haven't happened. You're scared that they're going to quiz you on biochemistry. You're scared they're going to ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. Y'all, you know more than them, right? As long as you're confident, please trust that you have expertise. Please trust that you can listen to someone's concerns. Please trust that you can make your best guess at what the next step should be. I promise you. So let's go like this. If you have a subject matter expertise, you know some stuff about something, plus you have you know how to coach, right? You have experience coaching, you have some kind of credential coaching, or maybe you don't have a credential yet, but you have experience. You can coach for somebody else. That's what you could do. You could be a coach for somebody else. Now, the last part of the triad, I'm sure you guys know what it is. Listen to this podcast, and it is business. This is the last part of creating a successful, viable online coaching business is you have got to learn business skills. If you want to build your own coaching business and not be a coach for someone else, then you need to learn business. If you're a coach for someone else, cool. You don't need to know marketing. If you want to do social media, you can or not. But if you want to have your own business, there's no getting around the fact that you have to learn business skills. I think there's this misconception, and I certainly had this when I got started, which was, I'm a pretty decent trainer. How hard can business be? It's just social media, right? How hard can it be? And then of course you get in there, and this is why oftentimes we do have about 30 to 40% of people who join FBA who have a business already, who have been trying to build it on their own. Or maybe they had one or two other business coaches that kind of sucked, and they were like, okay, I feel like I really want to do this with someone who I vibe with, who I feel like has the experience and strategy, who can help me. And so I think that there's a misconception that if you're a good trainer or you're a good coach, that you're automatically going to be good at business. And y'all, they're two separate skill sets. They are two different languages. It's like we're talking Japanese and Italian, totally different. So just because you're a good coach doesn't mean that you're going to be a good business owner. Just because, so if you want to have a job, cool, go work for someone else, be a coach for somebody else. There are plenty of online business owners who are always looking for co-coaches and things like that. Maybe you don't have to do any of the business stuff, no marketing, no selling, no social media if you don't want to. Some will require you to do that, some won't. But in order to build your own business, there's no getting around the fact that you have to learn these skills, whether it is content creation, email marketing, product development, offer creation, lead generation, marketing, sales, messaging, copywriting, technology. You need to learn these things. And by the way, no one just comes into this space knowing how to do this stuff. Even I work with, ironically, I do actually have a lot of business people in FBA and the strategy lab. Business meeting, they worked as a marketing director for somebody else, or they worked as a social media strategist for somebody else. But now they're starting their own thing. And they know business, but they don't know this kind of business, right? They know how maybe they have an undergrad in business administration, but doing entrepreneurship is so different. And so they're in there and they're learning business, even though technically they have a credential or a certification in business, because what we do is so different. Being a solopreneur is totally different than working on a team, a large corporation, and being a single person with a single role. You're going to be having a lot of roles. So number one, you're a coach. Number two, you're providing solutions. And number three, you're running a business. And you need to have all three of this. That's why I call it the triad. And so this is, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I do know some stuff. I do have an expertise of some kind. I know I can help people. Number two, I am confident that either I am a good coach or I could be a good coach because I understand people. I've been maybe working in person. I've been training, group fitness instructor. I'm front facing. I understand what it is to help someone make a transformation with their health and fitness, but I don't know business and I want to start my own business or I want to grow my own business. Y'all, you have to learn business, which of course is why something like FBA exists, and also why we are doing the free 8-day intensive Post to Profits. If you are looking for a low risk way to get started with business stuff and be like, yeah, dude, let me try this on. Let me see what it's like. Let me understand all the moving parts of the business we're in. Then you should join Post to Profits, 100% free. And we start next week. It's 8-day full-on business education. This is not like a little freebie. This is a full-on business education. And honestly, we've had people literally say that they learn more in this little training, this little 8-day intensive, than they did in a $10,000 mastermind. That's wild, but I do have the screenshot to prove it. So if you have not joined us, the link in the show notes. I would love to see you there. If you guys need anything, you know where to find me. Hopefully this was a informative episode that gave you a little bit more clarity on maybe where you need some help or where you need some mentorship or guidance. Good. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the DMs at JillFit, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.